Fix an engine? You? Charlotte Greystone's voice dripped with venom, echoing off the marble walls of the boardroom. The room stilled, 200 investors turning to glare at the man in gray coveralls standing by the water pitchers. Malik Carter froze, his calloused hands still gripping the glass jug. Charlotte rose slowly, her red heels cracking against the floor like gunshots. She stepped close enough that Malik could smell the sharp perfume radiating from her collar. Her diamond bracelet caught the light, flashing like a warning. "Here's the deal, Janitor," she hissed, each word sharp enough to cut. "Fix this engine that humiliated MIT engineers for 6 weeks, and I'll marry you right here, tonight." She snapped her fingers inches from his face. "But when you fail, and security will drag you out of here, and you'll never set foot in this building again." The room erupted in whispers. Contracts worth $50 million, the future of the company, the pride of Silicon Valley itself, all hung on a man they treated as invisible. Malik straightened his shoulders, his dark eyes steady, and for the first time, he spoke. "You all tested it with machines. I'll listen to it with something you don't have experience." The silence that followed was louder than any applause. If this gave you chills, share this video right now, hit subscribe for more incredible stories, and may your day be filled with courage and blessings. Comment Amen if you believe hidden talent deserves a chance to shine. The winter sky over Detroit was iron gray, heavy with clouds that seemed to press down on the city's steel bones. A brittle wind cut through the streets, rattling the windows of Greystone Motors headquarters, a gleaming tower of glass and chrome that pierced the skyline like a spear. Snowflakes clung stubbornly to the revolving doors before melting away into nothingness, just like the hopes of so many who walked through them. Inside, the air was too warm, too controlled, the scent of leather chairs, polished marble, and money clinging like perfume. The 22nd floor boardroom stretched like a cathedral of capitalism. It had floor-to-ceiling windows that looked out over the factories where Greystone's electric dreams were born, and a table so long it could have doubled as a runway. At the head of it, like a queen enthroned, sat Charlotte Greystone, CEO of the company that bore her family name. Charlotte was in her early 40s, tall, statuesque, with the kind of beauty that photographers would have killed to capture had she allowed them. Her hair, a cascade of platinum blonde, was always bound tightly in a bun, not a strand daring to rebel. Her face bore the sharp, cold symmetry of someone who had spent a lifetime being observed, judged, and admired. Her eyes, a stormy blue, cut through people as though they were glass. She was wrapped in a tailored charcoal suit, every seam stitched to intimidate, every line pressed to perfection. There was a diamond bracelet on her wrist, not for beauty, but for dominance, a gleam of wealth that said, "I have already won." Charlotte was not cruel by accident. Years ago, when she was still a rising executive under her father's shadow, an investor dismissed her as a pretty distraction. She had built her empire on ensuring no one would ever speak to her that way again. Respect was not given, she had learned. It was ripped from the throats of doubters. And so she commanded with precision, with fear, with a voice that could silence a room like a gunshot. But now, for the first time in years, her empire teetered. On the polished mahogany table lay the company's crown jewel, the prototype of an AI-guided electric engine, sleek in silver, cables coiled like veins pulsing with artificial life. It represented 3 years of research, 47 patents, and hundreds of millions in investment. On paper, it promised to revolutionize the delivery industry, boasting efficiency numbers so high they bordered on science fiction. In practice, it had failed every test. After exactly 14 minutes and 37 seconds, it would overheat, shut down, and display the same mocking error code, harmonic disruption detected. Around the table sat 20 executives, their suits crisp, their expressions lined with tension. They were engineers, financiers, legal advisors, each one clutching tablets filled with charts and projections now worth less than ash. The engine had made fools of them all. The silence was broken not by words, but by the squeak of rubber soles on marble. The boardroom doors opened, and in stepped Malik Carter, pushing a battered maintenance cart stacked with supplies, a mop, a bucket, cleaning rags, and 2 plastic bags of garbage collected from the executive lounge. Malik was 36, with broad shoulders that spoke of strength, though his gray coveralls did their best to erase his presence. His skin was a deep brown, his hands roughened by years of labor, the kind of hands that carried both resilience and quiet sorrow. He was tall, but he moved as though apologizing for taking up space, as though the world had convinced him he was meant to be invisible. His eyes, however, betrayed him. Dark, alert, filled with a watchful intelligence that he never let slip into his voice. He had once dreamed of being an engineer. He had studied at community college, burning with passion for machines, but life had other plans. His mother's cancer treatments had drained every penny, forcing him to trade classrooms for mops, textbooks for night shifts. Still, he carried within him a gift his grandfather had nurtured: the ability to hear the language of engines, to feel their rhythm as though they were living things. Now he was a janitor at Greystone Motors. At least that's what the badge said. The truth was harsher. He was a man who had sacrificed his future for his family, who swallowed humiliation so his daughter Ella could eat and sleep under a roof. He entered quietly, hoping to remain unnoticed, but Charlotte's eyes snapped to him like searchlights. "God," she said, her voice dripping with disgust. "Even in here? Does no one schedule these interruptions properly?" She pinched her nose with manicured fingers, her diamond bracelet catching the boardroom light. "You even smell like motor oil." The executives chuckled nervously, grateful the spotlight wasn't on them. Malik froze, trash bags clutched in his calloused hands, his pride pressing hard against the back of his throat. He wanted to disappear, but Charlotte wasn't finished. She stood, her red heels clicking across the marble like gunfire. She stopped just close enough for Malik to catch the scent of her perfume, expensive, icy, sharp as her words. "Here's a deal, maintenance boy," she said, her lips curling into a smile that had no warmth. She gestured toward the sputtering engine on the table. "Fix this $2 million machine that MIT engineers couldn't repair, and I'll marry you right here." The room erupted in forced laughter, but Malik only tightened his grip on the trash bags. Charlotte snapped her fingers inches from his face. "When you fail, and you will, security will escort you out permanently." Her voice rang out like a judge delivering a sentence. "Because clearly we have too much dead weight around here already." Silence followed. The executives leaned back, some smirking, others avoiding Malik's gaze entirely. The weight of humiliation pressed down on him like the clouds outside pressing on Detroit's skyline. For them, he was just a janitor, a piece of furniture that had suddenly spoken out of turn. But Malik's heart burned differently. He wasn't thinking about Charlotte's mockery or the laughter of the room. He was thinking about Ella Carter, his 10-year-old daughter waiting at home. Ella was small for her age, with a head full of curls the color of dark honey and wide brown eyes that always seemed to drink in the world around her. She loved to draw cars, filling page after page with designs that were sometimes wild, sometimes brilliant. She would often sit at the kitchen table, tongue sticking out in concentration, sketching futuristic engines as though she could imagine the future into existence. She believed her father could fix anything, a toy, a toaster, even a dream. Every time Malik looked at her, he knew he couldn't stay invisible forever. He couldn't let the world convince her that he was only what his coveralls said he was. Charlotte leaned closer, her whisper sharp enough to cut. "So? What's it going to be, janitor?" Malik looked at the engine, then at the executives, then back at Charlotte. He set the trash bags down slowly, straightened his back, and for the first time in years allowed the steel in his spine to show. "I'll do it," he said, his voice calm, steady. The room went still. 20 pairs of eyes widened, Charlotte's smile freezing into something brittle. Malik felt his grandfather's voice echo in his mind. a memory as warm as oil-stained hands guiding his. Engines don't care about skin color or titles. They only speak to those who listen. And for the first time, Malik allowed himself to believe he might finally be heard. The night had fallen heavy over Detroit, a curtain of frost settling over the city's shoulders. Street lamps flickered against the bitter wind, their halos bending in the haze of exhaust rising from passing cars. Malik Carter trudged home through slush-streaked sidewalks, his gray coveralls damp at the cuffs, his body aching from a day that had been more humiliation than labor. The memory of Charlotte Greystone's laughter still rang in his ears, the sharp mockery delivered with the precision of a blade. Yet, as he turned onto the cracked concrete path of his neighborhood, his stride grew steadier, lighter. The tower of Greystone Motors was miles behind him now. Ahead waited a modest apartment with peeling paint and a window that glowed faintly with the warm amber light of a desk lamp. That glow was Ella. The apartment was small, 2 bedrooms squeezed tight into a brick building whose best days had passed decades earlier. The hallway smelled faintly of boiled cabbage and old paint, a mix that clung to everything. But when Malik unlocked the door, the scent that greeted him was crayons and paper, a fragrance of dreams in progress. Ella Carter was sitting cross-legged on the worn rug of the living room, surrounded by papers scattered like fallen leaves. At 10 years old, she was thin and delicate, with curly hair the color of burnished bronze tumbling in loose strands around her face. Her cheeks bore faint freckles, and her eyes were large, brown, and impossibly bright, filled with an imagination that refused to dim despite the world pressing against her. She held a stubby pencil in one hand, tongue caught between her teeth in concentration, as she sketched the profile of a futuristic car that looked like a spaceship on wheels. "Daddy!" she exclaimed as Malik stepped inside, her voice carrying all the warmth he needed to drive out the cold. She leapt up, papers scattering, and wrapped herself around his waist. Malik dropped his bag and scooped her up, burying his face in her hair. For a moment, the weight of the world lifted. "What are you working on, little engineer?" he asked, setting her down gently. Ella grabbed a drawing and held it up proudly. It was a sleek car, all sharp lines and exaggerated wheels. On the side, in uneven block letters, she had written, "Carter Motors." "This one runs on sunlight," she explained, breathless with excitement. "And it never breaks down, not even after 1,000,000 miles. Malik chuckled, though his chest tightened. "Sounds like you've already solved the problems the big companies can't." She grinned, missing a tooth on the left side, and returned to her drawings. Malik watched her for a moment before heading into the kitchen, where dishes from breakfast still waited. The fridge hummed faintly, nearly empty save for a half-gallon of milk, some eggs, and a leftover container of soup from their elderly neighbor, Mrs. Langford. Margaret Langford, 72, lived alone across the hall. She was short and round, with a crown of white curls and kind blue eyes that had grown soft after years of raising 5 children, only to watch them scatter across the country. She had taken a liking to Ella, often dropping by with baked goods or warm meals, claiming it was too much food for one old woman anyway. Her presence was a blessing Malik never admitted he needed. That night, Malik reheated the soup, the steam fogging the window above the sink. He and Ella ate together at their tiny kitchen table, her chatter filling the silence he preferred not to break. She told him about her day at school, about a classmate who bragged his father worked at Ford, about how the other kids laughed when she mentioned her dad cleaned floors at Greystone. Malik's jaw tightened. "What did you say to them?" he asked gently. Ella shrugged, stirring her spoon through the broth. "I told them you're smarter than anyone's dad. I told them you're going to build the best car in the world." She looked up, her eyes shining. "Right, Daddy?" Malik swallowed hard. He wanted to tell her about Charlotte, about the cruel bet, about the shame that clung to him like oil he couldn't wash away. But he couldn't crush the faith that shone so fiercely in her. He reached across the table, took her small hand in his. "One day, sweetheart," he said softly. "One day, you'll see me fix something nobody else could." Ella smiled, and for her, it was promise enough. Later that evening, after Ella had fallen asleep with her sketches spread across her bed like protective talismans, Malik sat by the window, staring at the glowing city skyline. He pulled out a small wooden box from beneath his chair. Inside lay his old community college textbooks, grease-stained notebooks, and a single photograph of his grandfather, Samuel Carter, grinning beside a cherry-red Mustang. Samuel had been a towering figure, broad-shouldered, with hands like carved oak, a mechanic who believed engines were alive and deserved respect. He had taught Malik everything before his sudden heart attack had left an empty garage and a grandson with too many unanswered questions. Malik's mind drifted back to the boardroom that afternoon, the engine humming faintly before it failed. He remembered the sound, the slight hesitation at the 14th minute, the tremor in its artificial heartbeat. He knew he could fix it. The certainty sat in his bones. But certainty and opportunity were oceans apart, and Charlotte's words reminded him how wide that gulf remained. The next morning was Saturday, and Ella begged to go to the park. Malik agreed, though the December air bit at their faces. The park was nearly empty, save for a man tossing a frisbee to a wiry brown dog. The man was Tom Rivera, a postal worker in his early 50s, stocky with a friendly round face, perpetually flushed from the cold. He wore a faded USPS beanie and waved when he recognized Malik. "Morning, Carter," Tom called, his voice booming across the frosted grass. "Got Ella working on more blueprints, I bet." Ella giggled. "She's designing cars better than anything you'll ever drive, Tom," Malik teased, and Tom laughed heartily. His dog, Rusty, a 6-year-old mutt with wiry fur and ears that flopped comically when he ran, bounded over to Ella, tail wagging. She knelt to scratch behind his ears, her laughter carrying on the wind. They spent an hour at the park before heading home. As they walked back, Malik spotted a poster tacked to a lamppost. Greystone Motors Hiring, maintenance assistant, full-time. He stared at it for a long moment, wondering if fate was playing tricks. He was already invisible inside those walls. Could he ever become anything else there? That night, as snow began to fall again, Ella sat on the couch coloring her designs while Malik flipped through his old notebooks. Numbers, formulas, diagrams. They still made sense, still whispered to him like old friends. He felt the stirrings of something he hadn't felt in years, the hunger to prove himself, not for Charlotte, not for the executives, but for the little girl curled up beside him with crayons smudging her fingers. When he tucked Ella into bed, she asked sleepily, "Daddy, do you think when I grow up, people will laugh at me too?" Malik brushed a curl from her forehead, his voice steady, though his chest ached. "No, baby. They'll see what you can do, and when they ask where you got it from, you'll tell them your father never gave up." He turned out the light, but long after Ella drifted into dreams of futuristic cars, Malik sat awake, staring at his notebooks, the boardroom engine replaying in his mind like a broken record. Somewhere deep inside, he knew. His chance was coming, and when it did, he would not let it slip away. Monday morning arrived with a sky the color of old steel. Detroit's skyline shimmered with ice as the sun strained against a haze of smog and frost. In the heart of downtown, Greystone Motors headquarters loomed like a citadel of glass and ambition. Its windows reflected the gray horizon, towering over the workers who trudged in with coffee cups clutched like lifelines. Inside, the mood was anything but hopeful. The engine prototype had stalled progress for weeks, and rumors had begun leaking beyond the walls. If Charlotte Greystone didn't secure new investment soon, the company's empire could fracture. Charlotte had decided on a bold strategy, an international investors' assembly, designed as a show of dominance. 200 employees and guests had been summoned to the main auditorium, a vast chamber of steel beams and polished wood, where rows of leather chairs cascaded down toward a central stage. At the front, the prototype engine rested beneath brilliant lights, gleaming like a fallen idol. Cameras were positioned discreetly, recording for both official records and Charlotte's personal archive of proof of control. Charlotte Greystone, the CEO, stood at the edge of the stage with the poise of royalty. Her tailored navy dress fit like armor, heels striking the wooden floor with deliberate rhythm. Her hair was pinned in its usual severe bun, her face as flawless and cold as porcelain. She exuded authority, but there was an edge beneath the surface, the tension of a ruler whose crown was slipping. The guests filtered in. Among them was Klaus Müller, a German industrialist in his late 50s with neatly combed silver hair, a square jaw, and the rigid posture of a man who had commanded boardrooms for decades. His suit was tailored in the old European style, broad shoulders, dark wool, understated but crushingly expensive. Klaus was known for perfectionism. Companies feared his nod as much as his disapproval. Beside him walked Dr. Elena Rodriguez, a former Tesla engineer now serving as a consultant. In her early 50s, she was lean and sharp-eyed, her black hair streaked with gray and tied into a low bun. She wore glasses with thin frames, and her olive skin bore the faint lines of long nights spent in laboratories. Unlike Klaus, she had no patience for arrogance. Her reputation was built on truth in engineering, not theatrics. Other figures filled the rows: venture capitalists from New York, representatives from European auto groups, and analysts who whispered predictions into their phones. Among them was Patricia Brooks, a board member of Greystone Motors. Patricia was in her late 40s with auburn hair styled in a bob, her frame tall and angular. Her dark green suit gave her a severe presence, though her reputation was as someone who listened carefully and struck hard when the moment demanded. Malik Carter did not belong in such a gathering, and yet fate drew him there. He had been assigned by a supervisor to replace water pitchers in the auditorium that morning, a deliberate scheduling choice Malik suspected had Charlotte's fingerprints. For weeks, she had timed his janitorial tasks to coincide with investor tours, using his presence as a prop in her narrative of charity employment. He was the silent symbol she paraded to prove Greystone gave opportunities even to the invisible. When Malik entered the room, pushing his maintenance cart, a hush followed. Conversations dimmed as eyes tracked him, not with curiosity, but with disdain. His gray coveralls looked out of place against the tailored suits. His boots squeaked faintly on the polished wood, a sound that echoed louder in his mind than the applause Charlotte later demanded. Charlotte's voice sliced through the air. "Ah, there's our resident helper." She let the pause linger, letting her audience share in the condescension. "We at Greystone believe in giving everyone a chance. Even those who may never contribute to innovation can still push a mop with pride." Laughter rippled through the rows, though some shifted uncomfortably. Patricia Brooks' eyes narrowed, but she said nothing. Malik's chest tightened, his grip on the water pitcher firm. He replaced it silently at the table by the stage, the spotlight searing his back like fire. Charlotte continued, striding across the stage as though conducting a play. "Today, ladies and gentlemen, you will see what separates visionaries from dreamers. This machine," she gestured grandly at the gleaming engine, "has defied our brightest teams. But with your investment, we will overcome every obstacle." Murmurs ran through the audience. Klaus Müller remained impassive, but his fingers tapped once against his chair arm, a signal of impatience. Dr. Rodriguez scribbled notes without glancing up. Then Charlotte's eyes flicked to Malik, lingering long enough for the room to follow. Her lips curved into a cruel smile. "Or perhaps," she said, voice dripping sarcasm, "we should ask our janitor here. After all, why rely on MIT engineers when we have him?" A hush fell. Malik froze. Heat spread across his face, but something inside him shifted. Not anger, not shame, but the quiet resolve that had carried him through years of sacrifice. Charlotte stepped closer, savoring the moment. "Fix it for us, maintenance boy. Right here, right now. In front of our investors, our board, our entire company. Prove your worth. And when you fail, and you will, I'll ensure you never work in this industry again." Gasps broke through the room. 2 security guards appeared at the side doors, broad-shouldered men in black suits, arms crossed, theatrics designed to make Malik small. Employees whispered, pulling out phones to record. The humiliation was complete. But Malik's gaze fell not on Charlotte, nor on the investors. He remembered Ella, curled on her bed with crayons smudging her fingers, whispering, "One day, Daddy, they'll see." He remembered his grandfather Samuel, grease on his hands, saying, "Engines don't care about diplomas or skin. They only respond to those who listen." Malik set the pitcher down, straightened his spine, and spoke, his voice calm but carrying across the hall. "I'll do it." The words cut like a thunderclap. 200 heads turned. Klaus Muller's brow rose, and for the first time, interest flickered in his cold blue eyes. Dr. Rodriguez lowered her pen slowly, her lips pursed in curiosity. Patricia Brooks leaned back, arms crossed, assessing him anew. Charlotte blinked, her mask slipping for a second before tightening into a sharper smile. "Very well," she said, spreading her arms like a ringmaster inviting the next act. "Ladies and gentlemen, prepare yourselves for a demonstration of janitorial genius." The auditorium buzzed, a storm of whispers and skepticism. Malik walked toward the engine, every step heavy but certain. He felt 200 eyes pressing down on him, felt the weight of Charlotte's smirk, the threat of security waiting to drag him out. Yet in that moment, he was no longer invisible. As he reached the stage, Malik rested his hands briefly on the engine's cold frame. Beneath the hum of artificial systems, he felt it, the faint, irregular rhythm, like a heartbeat out of sync. His grandfather's words rang again. "Respect the machine, understand its language, and it will never lie to you." Malik inhaled deeply, then lifted his head to face the crowd. "This engine isn't broken," he said, his voice clear. "It's just not being heard." The room fell silent. For a heartbeat, even Charlotte had no reply. And Malik knew his moment had arrived. The engine loomed on the stage like a beast caged in chrome. Its polished casing reflected the auditorium lights, every gleam a reminder of the millions of dollars poured into its creation, and the millions more riding on its success. 200 pairs of eyes pressed down on Malik Carter as if their weight could break his resolve. Yet Malik didn't flinch. He rested his hand gently on the cold metal, as if greeting an old friend, his fingertips sensing vibrations the machines and charts had failed to capture. Behind him, a ripple of chuckles ran through the engineering team. Men in lab coats and tailored jackets exchanged smirks, whispering about the absurdity of a janitor presuming to diagnose what they had spent months failing to solve. One of them, Evan Whitmore, a 30-year-old systems engineer with slicked-back blonde hair and the self-assurance of someone born into privilege, muttered loud enough for the nearest investors to hear. "Maybe he'll mop the vibrations away." Laughter followed. Evan had always been quick with a cruel joke. Growing up as the son of a wealthy automotive dealer, he had learned that arrogance often substituted for ability, but not everyone dismissed Malik. In the third row, Dr. Raymond Holt, a man in his late 40s with salt and pepper hair and a weathered face, leaned forward. Holt's frame was lean, almost wiry, his gray suit slightly rumpled, as though he cared more for problems than appearances. A former Navy engineer turned independent consultant, Holt had spent years listening to engines under battlefield stress. He knew the difference between bravado and conviction, and Malik's eyes held the latter. Malik closed his own eyes for a moment. The room dissolved around him. The hum of fluorescent lights, the shuffling of restless investors, even Charlotte's smirk, all of it faded. What remained was the faint pulse of the engine, steady yet flawed, like a drummer playing out of time. He tilted his head, listening to its rhythm. 14 minutes and 37 seconds. That was when it broke. He could almost hear the moment it stumbled, chasing harmony it couldn't find. He spoke softly, but the microphone carried his words. "It's not a software error. It's not the casing. It's fighting itself. The machine is speaking, but nobody's listening." Another wave of chuckles rolled through the engineers. Evan scoffed. "Engines don't talk, janitor." But Holt's voice cut through, calm and firm. "Maybe they do." If you know the language, heads turned toward him. Charlotte narrowed her eyes, annoyed at the interference. Holt met Malik's gaze and gave the smallest nod, a silent acknowledgement that someone believed. Charlotte, unwilling to lose control of the narrative, stepped forward with her voice sharp as glass. By all means, Mr. Carter, enlighten us with your janitorial linguistics. She gestured broadly toward the engine, theatrics dripping from every move. Malik ignored her. He crouched by the machine, his hands tracing the contours of bolts and brackets. He didn't need the diagnostics, didn't need the blinking screens. He had grown up with grease under his nails, had learned from Samuel Carter, his grandfather, that engines had tempers, rhythms, even secrets. And this one was out of tune. Meanwhile, across the city, Ella Carter sat in her fourth-grade classroom, her small hands clutching a colored pencil too tightly. The classroom smelled faintly of chalk and old carpet, posters of multiplication tables peeling at the edges. At 10, she was the smallest in her class, and often the target of children who sensed vulnerability. Today was worse than usual. During recess, a boy named Derek Mason, tall for his age with unruly brown hair and a chipped front tooth, had cornered her near the swings. Derek was the kind of child who found strength in cruelty, often echoing the disdain he overheard at home. His father, a factory worker laid off when automation cut jobs, had cursed janitors and nobodies for years, and Derek repeated the venom with ease. "My dad says your father scrubs toilets," Derek sneered, his friends laughing beside him. "That's all he'll ever be." Ella's cheeks burned, her eyes stinging with tears. She wanted to scream, to fight back, but the words tangled in her throat. Instead, she clutched the sketchbook she always carried and fled to the far end of the playground, hiding behind the slide. There, she opened to a fresh page and began to draw. A car, sleek and shining, with her father's name etched boldly along the side. Carter Motors. Her tears smudged the graphite, but she pressed on, whispering to herself, "One day they'll see." Her teacher, Ms. Laura Jenkins, a kind woman in her late 30s with chestnut hair and a gentle but firm voice, noticed Ella's absence from the group. Ms. Jenkins had a reputation for protecting the quiet children, having been one herself once, growing up shy in a household of loud older brothers. She approached Ella softly. "Sweetheart, are you okay?" Ella sniffled, hiding the drawing against her chest. "They said my dad's just a janitor." Ms. Jenkins crouched down, her eyes warm but steady. "Ella, people say mean things when they're scared. Your father works hard, and hard work is nothing to be ashamed of. You keep drawing, you keep dreaming. That's what matters." She brushed a strand of hair from Ella's face. "And I'll handle the boys." Ella nodded, her tears easing, but her small voice carried fierce conviction. "He's going to fix something big." "I know it." Back in the auditorium, Malik stood, wiping grease from his fingertips onto his coveralls. His calm voice rose above the restless crowd. "This engine doesn't fail because it's broken. It fails because it's trying to correct something that isn't wrong. The AI is listening for perfection according to one standard, but the parts are built to another." It's a song out of key murmurs spread through the audience. Some investors leaned forward, intrigued despite themselves. Evans scoffed louder. "He's guessing." He doesn't even know the system architecture. Malik turned, meeting Evans' eyes without flinching. "I don't need the architecture. I can hear it. You tested the numbers the AI was programmed to expect, but you never listened to what the engine was actually telling you." The words hit like a stone thrown into still water, ripples spreading across the room. Klaus Muller's lips twitched, almost imperceptibly, into the suggestion of a smile. Dr. Rodriguez adjusted her glasses, interest sharpening in her gaze, and Holt sat straighter, a faint gleam of admiration lighting his otherwise tired features. Charlotte, sensing control slipping, snapped her fingers at the guards by the doors. Their looming presence drew attention back to her. "Enough theater. Mr. Carter wants to play engineer. Let him. But when this circus collapses, it will be clear who belongs in this room and who does not." Malik turned back to the engine. The crowd was restless, buzzing with disbelief and curiosity. He placed both hands on the frame again, closing his eyes to the hum beneath the chrome. He didn't care about Charlotte's theatrics or Evan's sneers. All that mattered was the voice of the machine, the rhythm beneath the noise. And in that moment, he felt something deeper than humiliation or fear. He felt purpose. The air inside the auditorium had thickened, charged with the weight of expectation. 200 people leaned forward, their breaths shallow as Malik Carter crouched by the machine that had humbled some of the world's best engineers. He ran his fingers across the casing again, his touch gentle yet deliberate, like a pianist coaxing sound from reluctant keys. The engine's hum spoke to him. Where others heard only noise, Malik heard conversation, one part out of rhythm, a voice lost in translation. His eyes narrowed, and he whispered to himself, "You're not broken. You're misunderstood." From the back of the room, Evan Whitmore rolled his eyes dramatically, muttering to a colleague. The young engineer's arrogance had only grown since Malik first touched the machine. He leaned back in his chair, smirking as if already composing the mocking email he'd send to his peers. But not everyone dismissed Malik. Dr. Raymond Holt sat straighter, pen forgotten in his notebook. Years of listening to stressed machines in war zones had taught him one truth: intuition often outpaced data. Holt studied Malik's movements closely, recognizing the confidence in his eyes. And then there was Patricia Brooks, the board member with auburn hair and sharp eyes. She had remained silent throughout the session, but her gaze never wavered from Malik. Patricia had grown up in Detroit's working-class neighborhoods, her father once a machinist laid off during the industry's decline. She knew what it was to be underestimated, and though her suit and board seat placed her among the elite now, her sympathy lay with the underdog. Malik stood, his mind racing. "It's harmonic frequency," he said, his voice steady. "The AI expects tolerances built to American standards, but the components are manufactured with German precision. They're out of sync. Not wrong, just misaligned." The room buzzed with murmurs. Klaus Muller, the German investor, tilted his head, intrigued. His steel blue eyes fixed on Malik with an intensity that unnerved even seasoned executives. He tapped a finger against his knee, silent but attentive. Charlotte Greystone, still commanding the stage in her severe navy dress, folded her arms. "And how exactly do you plan to fix a misalignment that 3 teams of Ivy League engineers couldn't?" Her tone was venom wrapped in silk. Malik didn't hesitate. He walked toward a side cabinet containing spare components and tools, guarded by a technician who looked bewildered at being bypassed. From within, Malik pulled out a simple round piece of metal, a resonance dampener, a disc with carefully machined perforations. It was no bigger than his palm, its design unassuming, yet its purpose profound. "This," Malik said, holding it up for all to see, "isn't new technology. It's a bridge, a buffer between 2 standards. It doesn't force the engine to change. It helps the AI and the mechanics find common ground." Evan laughed aloud. "You think a cheap piece of scrap metal will fix what months of analysis couldn't?" Malik ignored him. His hands were steady as he fitted the dampener into place, sliding it between existing mounts. It clicked in perfectly, as though the engine had been waiting for it all along. The act was simple, elegant. A child could have done it, and yet no one in the room had seen it until now. Charlotte's expression faltered for the first time. The investors leaned forward, whispering to one another. Klaus Muller checked his platinum watch, a habit of precision, his patience measured in seconds. "Start it," Malik said quietly. A technician hesitated, glancing at Charlotte for approval. Her lips tightened, but she gestured curtly. The technician pressed the ignition. The engine rumbled to life with a growl that filled the hall, its vibrations deep and resonant. For a moment, everyone held their breath. 4 minutes passed, then 10, then 14, the cursed minute marker. Malik's chest tightened, but he did not look away. At 14 minutes and 37 seconds, the auditorium braced for failure. Instead, the hum smoothed into a purr, deep and steady. The irregular knocking was gone, replaced by a harmony so precise it sent chills down spines. The engine sang, 8 cylinders in perfect synchrony, AI and mechanics finally speaking the same language. A gasp swept through the crowd, followed by stunned silence. Then, the diagnostic screens flashed green across the board. Efficiency, 96%. Oil pressure, optimal. Heat levels, stable. For the first time, the machine exceeded even its theoretical maximum. Dr. Holt rose to his feet, his voice carrying reverence. "It's beautiful." Patricia Brooks smiled faintly, murmuring, My father would have called that poetry in steel. The silence broke into thunderous applause. Investors clapped, employees cheered, and the sound echoed like a storm rolling through the hall. People rose from their seats, some shouting, some whistling, their disbelief giving way to awe. Charlotte stood frozen, her carefully constructed mask cracking. What was meant to be Malik's public humiliation had turned into his coronation. She felt her authority slipping, her control unraveling thread by thread. Even Klaus Muller, usually inscrutable, leaned toward his associates and spoke quietly in German. The words carried weight. This man understands harmony. That's rare. His colleagues nodded, scribbling notes, already recalculating their strategies. Malik, standing by the humming engine, did not bask in their applause. His mind drifted to Ella. He imagined her at her desk, sketching cars with her small hands, whispering that one day they'd all see. For her, this was the moment. Meanwhile, in a classroom across Detroit, Ella sat with her sketchbook open. Derek Mason, the boy who had mocked her days before, glanced at her drawing and sneered again. Still pretending your dad builds cars? Ella didn't cry this time. She looked up, her brown eyes shining with quiet defiance. He doesn't pretend, she said. He fixes things no one else can. Ms. Jenkins, her teacher, overheard and placed a reassuring hand on Ella's shoulder. That's right. Some people change the world quietly, until suddenly, everyone hears them. Ella's smile returned. She pressed her pencil harder against the page, her sketch taking on sharper lines, bolder strokes. Back in the auditorium, the applause finally subsided. Malik stepped away from the engine, wiping his hands. His face was calm, his posture steady, but inside, his heart roared with the satisfaction of proving himself. Charlotte cleared her throat, trying to regain control. Well, she said, forcing a thin smile, it seems even a blind squirrel can find a nut on occasion. Her words fell flat, drowned by the lingering echo of applause. Patricia Brooks stood, her voice carrying authority. No, Charlotte. That wasn't luck. That was insight. She looked directly at Malik. The kind this company needs. The room erupted again, voices rising with agreement. Employees, once silent in fear, began chanting Malik's name. Even the investors joined in the applause, their skepticism replaced by admiration. Charlotte's eyes burned, but she knew the truth. Her attempt at humiliation had backfired. Malik Carter, the janitor she had mocked, was now the man who had saved Greystone Motors. Detroit was glowing that evening, the city lit in fractured gold beneath rows of street lamps. Snow had melted into dark puddles along the sidewalks, reflecting neon from corner diners and storefronts. The air was crisp, laced with the aroma of roasted chestnuts from a vendor stationed near Campus Martius Park, where families wandered beneath twinkling holiday lights. For Malik Carter, life had changed in a matter of weeks. No longer invisible in gray coveralls, he now wore the jacket of a senior diagnostics engineer, a simple navy garment with his name stitched in clean embroidery. The new title meant stability, a paycheck large enough to keep Ella's future secure, and above all, a chance to stand as the man he had always believed he could be. That Saturday evening, Malik walked hand in hand with Ella through the streets of downtown. Ella, bundled in a red coat and knit hat that covered her curls, skipped at his side, pointing to the skating rink crowded with children. Her cheeks glowed pink in the cold, her brown eyes sparkling. "Daddy, can we skate after dinner?" she asked. Malik smiled. "We'll see." "I don't want to fall and embarrass you." "You can fix engines but not balance," she teased, her giggle ringing through the night. As they turned a corner onto Jefferson Avenue, the sound of a sputtering engine drew their attention. Parked haphazardly against the curb was a sleek black luxury sedan, its hood up, steam rising into the frosty air. The driver stood nearby, coat wrapped tightly around her, phone pressed to her ear. Her heels clicked impatiently against the pavement as she muttered into the receiver. It was Charlotte Greystone. Even out of the boardroom, Charlotte radiated authority. Her tall frame was wrapped in a tailored wool coat, dark gray with a fur collar, her platinum hair now looser than Malik had ever seen it, cascading in waves against her shoulders. But there was a tremor in her poise, the faint frustration of someone stripped of her usual control. She frowned as the person on the other end of the line gave her little reassurance. "Of course you can't send a truck for another hour," she snapped, then sighed, pinching the bridge of her nose. "Yes, fine, I'll wait." She turned and froze when she noticed Malik and Ella approaching. For a moment her eyes widened, blue irises catching the glow of the street lamps. The woman who once wielded her power like a weapon now looked almost human. "Problems?" Malik asked, his voice calm, even gentle. He placed Ella's hand on his coat pocket so she wouldn't wander into the street. He approached the car, tilting his head to peer under the hood. Charlotte hesitated, pride and vulnerability clashing across her face. "It stalled," she admitted finally, her voice quieter than Malik had ever heard it. "I was on my way to a dinner with the board." Malik nodded. "Let me take a look." Before she could protest, he leaned over the engine bay, his hands steady. Charlotte stood close enough to catch the scent of motor oil mixed with soap on his skin, so different from the sterile perfumes of her world. Ella watched curiously, tugging at her mittens, whispering, "Daddy's gonna fix it, I know." The problem was simple. A loose clamp on the radiator hose. Malik tightened it with a small wrench he carried in his pocket, a habit born of years when broken things were daily companions. He stepped back and gestured to the driver's seat. "Try it now." Charlotte slid into the car, her posture elegant even in discomfort. She turned the key and the engine roared back to life, smooth and steady. She exhaled a breath she hadn't realized she'd been holding, then looked up at Malik through the windshield. Something softened in her expression. When she stepped out, she lingered by the open door. "You saved me. Again," she said quietly, a wry smile tugging at her lips. "If you keep this up, I'll run out of pride to swallow." Malik chuckled. "Engines don't care about pride. They just need someone to listen." Her laugh was softer this time, genuine. She glanced at Ella, who stood beside Malik, eyes wide with admiration for both her father and the woman before her. Charlotte hesitated, then gestured toward a cafe on the corner, its windows glowing with warm light. "Let me buy you both a coffee." "Or hot chocolate," she added, looking at Ella. Inside the cafe, the three of them sat at a small round table near the window. Ella sipped hot chocolate topped with whipped cream, leaving a white mustache on her upper lip that made Charlotte laugh. Malik stirred his coffee slowly, the tension in his shoulders easing as the conversation shifted from engines and boardrooms to lighter things. Charlotte admitted in halting words that she had been wrong. Wrong to dismiss him, wrong to mock him, wrong to believe power was built only on intimidation. Her voice carried the weight of years spent cultivating ruthlessness, a shield forged from wounds she never named, the betrayal of investors who once underestimated her, the condescension of men who reduced her to beauty over brilliance. "I built walls so high," she said, her hands folded tightly around her cup, "that I stopped seeing who I crushed under them." Her eyes lifted to Malik's. "I owe you an apology." Malik studied her for a long moment, then nodded. "Everyone deserves a chance to grow. Question is, are you ready to listen?" For the first time in years, Charlotte didn't feel like a queen, or a predator, or even a CEO. She felt like a woman at a table with a man who saw her clearly. They left the cafe together, Ella skipping slightly ahead. Outside, the night was colder, but the air between Malik and Charlotte felt warmer. She touched his arm lightly before he could turn to go. "Malik," she said, her voice quiet, almost tentative. "Would you have dinner with me? Not as your boss, not as your critic. As someone who would like to know the man who changed everything." Malik blinked, surprised, then smiled faintly. "I'll have to check my daughter's schedule. She runs my life, you know." Charlotte laughed, genuine and free, and Ella looked back at them, smiling. In her young heart, she understood something had shifted. As they parted ways that night, the glow of the street lamps painted their shadows close together. For Malik, it wasn't about vengeance or pride anymore. It was about dignity, kindness, and the possibility that even the hardest hearts could change when shown patience. And for Charlotte, it was the beginning of something she had never planned for, a chance not just to rebuild a company, but to rebuild herself. In the end, Malik's story reminds us that dignity, kindness, and perseverance can open doors we never imagined. Just like an engine, life sometimes falls out of rhythm, but when we listen closely and treat others with respect, harmony can be restored. In our daily lives, it is easy to overlook people or judge them by their job, their clothes, or their past. This story shows us that greatness often hides in unexpected places. The janitor, the quiet neighbor, the person others dismiss. They may hold the solution, the wisdom, or the courage that can change everything. If this touched your heart, share this story with someone who needs hope today. Leave your thoughts in the comments, and do not forget to subscribe so you never miss more inspiring stories. May God bless everyone watching, and if you believe that hidden potential deserves to be seen, write amen in the comments.